varied hour ahead. Join me after the news.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock. Police are investigating whether a stabbing on a train in Cambridgeshire is linked with 3 knife offences in Peterborough in the previous 24 hours. A barber shop was targeted twice and a 14-year-old boy stabbed in the city centre. 32-year-old Anthony Williams is accused of 10 attempted murders on the LNER service, which was brought to a stop at Huntingdon. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has praised the actions of train staff.
We all share in the revulsion of this shocking incident, but there's no doubt that their collective action, their brave action, saved countless lives, and I know the whole country is grateful for that.
Anthony Williams faces a further charge related to an attack on the Docklands Light Railway in London. He's been remanded in custody ahead of a Crown Court appearance next month. Days of disruption are being predicted after a train derailment in Cumbria. An Avanti service from Glasgow to London hit a landslide in the dark this morning. Nigel Farage has suggested there'll be an early general election in 2027 because of economic collapse. He said if Reform UK was to win, it would remove inheritance tax from family farms and family-run businesses, but warns substantial tax cuts were not realistic at this current moment in time. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed down 16 points at 97.01. The pound buys $1.31 and €1.14. LBC weather: rain in northern and western England, also in Wales tonight, drier elsewhere, mild with a low of 10 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Tim Humphrey.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening. If ever there was a day to sit back a bit and seriously think about the prospect of reform being the next government, it's probably today. They've been leading in the polls for 9 months now, and this morning Nigel Farage made his big city speech, during which he predicted Britain's economic collapse and an early general election in 2027. There's been for a long time a puzzle about Reform's economics. Is this a populist party wanting to bring back factories and use nationalisation to protect industries and keep paying out welfare to its base of voters? Or is it a modern Thatcherite party wanting above all to slash taxes and reduce the size of the state? Now, I don't think today's speech gave a clear answer to that conundrum. Farage committed himself to an industrial strategy and what he said would be short-term partial nationalisations, but he also said he would radically cut the welfare bill, including hitting public sector pensions. He's ditched his huge tax cut promises, but still wants to raise the threshold for income tax to £20,000. If there is a single theme, it must be making work pay.
And we are on the side of working people. We are the party of Alarm Clock Britain. And we want people who are out there working to be genuinely better off working than they are on a whole range of benefits.
But the big question this evening is whether the numbers really yet add up. Is this, as Labour says, a return to austerity? Let's talk first to Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of the party, who spent a lot of his time talking to business and the city and who makes his own big speech on Wednesday. Richard, thanks for coming in. Let me ask you, first of all, that big philosophical question. Are you a Thatcherite party or are you a populist party leaning in some respects to the left?
We are a party of reformers and common sense, Andrew, and what Nigel set out today is we are our own people. We're business people, and we will make work pay. We will make risk-taking pay. Risk is a good thing. Small businesses, Nigel focused very strongly on that, but we said very clearly we've got to make substantial cuts in the wasteful spending across the whole public sector. I've already identified some. I'll be talking more on Wednesday about this. So when we make the spending cuts, we make the regulatory cuts, you create growth, then you can afford what we call performance-related tax cuts, but only then.
Okay, I am still confused philosophically, but let's leave that to one side and just be absolutely clear. When you said at the time of the election that you were going to raise the higher rate of income tax threshold to £70,000, that's off the agenda now.
At the end of the day, the key things we're focusing on is the aspiration, not day one, but the aspiration to make work pay for the lowest earners by lifting the starting point of income tax from £12,500 to £20,000. So that's the thing to focus on. But to achieve that, we've got to make the spending cuts by slashing net stupid zero. We can make substantial cuts and other changes.
So the rest of it, Richard, cutting fuel duty by 20 pence per litre, abolishing VAT on energy bills, inheritance tax, corporation tax, VAT, all gone.
That was a list for the time. Now we're in a completely different time.
But those tax cuts have all gone.
All aspirational, good ideas, but at the end of the day, the finances of the country are in a terrible state. They're going to get worse. As Nigel talked about today, we're very worried about the bond markets. We've got to focus on cutting the wasteful spending, making work pay, making small businesses want to take more risk. That will create growth. Then you can do tax cuts, such as we've talked about.
To get there, any responsible government, we both know, is going to have some losers as well as some winners. And I want to ask you a couple of things about the losers in all of this. Now, you yourself have said that defined benefit pensions in the public sector are becoming unaffordable. Those are the pensions that, nurses and doctors and the police and many more in the public sector get at the moment. So my first question is, are you going to cut them? And if so, is that going to be retrospective? If I'm a police officer retiring now on a pension, am I going to lose some of my pension under reform?
No. What we're saying is we've got to talk about the future and what's the right structure for pensions for everybody in the future. I've already started to talk about the management of the local government pension schemes. We've got to look at the whole issue of the future of the unfunded pension liabilities. The thing is to look at that in the future for future entrants.
So you're saying to people who are in the public sector at the moment, civil servants and the people I was mentioning,
a contract is a contract. They're not going to lose anything. Is an employment contract.
So this is not really a big saver in the short term. This is
Andrew,
no, in the short term it's not, Andrew, because they carry on getting their money.
Andrew, you have to appreciate the scale of the liabilities that are mounting up as people join the defined benefit public sector pension schemes, and it is enormous. And we're having a lot of work done. There'll be more on that. But
I'm not saying it's not a good thing to look at this. I'm just saying that in the short term, you're not going to save much money because all the people who are already on the defined pension carry on getting it.
I fundamentally disagree.
All right. Let me ask you about something else. You think the minimum wage is too high? It's not very high. It's sort of £10 or if you're younger.
As Nigel said, there's a range of ways of looking at it. The reality is that the Chancellor reduced the starting point for paying national insurance. So we've got to re-look at all that. And here's the point. If it means that young people are priced out of work because the minimum wage for young people has been increased too far, you've got to be willing to look at it.
So it's about 10 quid an hour. You think that's too far? Too much?
But the direction of travel is further north in a declining...
One day perhaps,
over the next couple of years, that's the Labour ambition. In a declining economy where private sector jobs are falling, we've got to be realistic about what's the right thing. So, what works?
Okay, so listen, I'm really interested in this. I'm sitting at home. I am 18 years old. I'm going to get the minimum wage in my first job. I really want to know what Richard Tice thinks I should be paid per hour.
Well, the great thing is to try and make sure that you're not taxed too much.
Give me an answer. Come on, Richard. You can give me an answer.
I'm not going to give you a per hour, per minute, because we're talking about in 3 years' time or 2 years' time when there's a general election.
But right now, you're saying £10 is too much.
What I'm going to say to any youngster is we will make work pay. And at the moment, in my constituency, I know 30 youngsters who were denied an opportunity in one theme park alone because of the national insurance increases. That's the sort of thing that I'm focusing on.
OK, so I'm listening at the moment and I'm thinking that if Reform become the government, I am going to lose some money, but they won't tell me how much.
No, if you're what we call alarm clock Britain, if you're getting up and going to work, no, you won't lose money. It's those who are abusing the system. It's the waste, of which there is vast amounts. They're the people we need to encourage to say, actually, you can't. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Work is a great thing. Everybody needs to work, including, as we said last week in a press conference, if you've got mild anxiety, the best solution to that, go to work.
Again, don't agree with the principle, but let's look at the detail of this. You've said mild anxiety. Who decides if my anxiety is mild or medium?
face-to-face assessments as opposed to Zoom assessments.
So that takes a lot of time,
Yes,
and it's
it does.
expensive and slow.
Yeah.
But that's what you're going to do.
Yeah, but the assumption must
okay.
be, it's up to the individual to prove that they've got, serious mental health issues, which is a very serious illness. We all know that. But what I think many people, the Alarm Clock Britain, are furious at those who are basically skiving.
I'm just trying to think about the amount of money that might be saved here, because if you don't know, and I don't know, and neither of us do know, how many of these people are really seriously mentally ill and really can't work, and how many, in your words, are skiving or have got very minor things. We don't know the numbers, therefore we can't tell what kind of savings are going to be made.
Zia Yusuf has been making some calculations.
He doesn't know either.
He makes some assumptions, but we also know, for example, we shouldn't be paying benefits to foreign nationals. That will save tens of billions of pounds.
That, as we both know, is a slightly different issue. I'm talking about the big numbers.
Andrew,
are
wrong, Andrew. It's all the same issue of saving wasteful, unnecessary public sector spending.
But in terms of the savings,
you get the deficit down. Once you get the deficit down, if you start to deregulate back to where we need to be, then you create growth. And when you've got growth, you can afford performance-related tax cuts.
All right. At the moment, we spend as a country somewhere between 12 and 20 billion pounds a year on people with mental health problems who can't work. No one knows the exact figure, but that's the sort of range.
And we spend almost double that on net stupid zero, which we will scrap immediately.
Let me come to an even bigger figure, a much, much bigger figure. We spend £177 billion a year on pensioners. Now, that has gone up and up and up because of the triple lock. It's gone up from something like 2% of GDP back in the 50s and 60s to north of 8% now. And if you're looking at the welfare bill, that is the bit that is running out of control. But your party won't talk about it. Nor the other
Andrew,
parties
for the third time this evening, you're wrong. On a number of occasions, Nigel has clearly said that we're not guaranteeing the triple lock. The nation's finances are in serious trouble, and nothing's affordable if you go bust.
Well, that's a really important moment. So if I'm a pensioner listening, you will not guarantee the triple lock.
That's what we've said before, and we continue to say that. We can't guarantee it because we know the nation's finances are in a shocking state. Look, we'd all love to be able to pay as much as possible. We can only know where we're at when we start to make major savings, as we've talked about. But we're not guaranteeing the triple lock.
We are in trouble as a country, but even in trouble as a country, we have a lot of people still who are relatively prosperous. And the people that you are looking at for savings are the young and relatively impoverished on the minimum wage, and pensioners, some of whom may be very impoverished as well. Is that entirely fair? In other words, is this a reasonable approach?
The people that we are urging to focus most on is those who are not working, who should be working, young people, middle-aged people, for whom they've got trapped. Many people have ended up being trapped on welfare because the whole welfare system has become skewed. We're saying we've got to motivate you back into work. That's the big one.
One final question. It may seem a rather silly, small thing, but you've said that you're going to lift the two-child cap, but only for married people with children.
Well, that was one example.
That's what you said today. I'm just wondering, if people are living together but are not married, would they count?
We'll produce all the detail. We've got plenty of time to get into all the detail. The point is working.
But
Andrew.
we agree it's interesting.
It is interesting, but it's all about working, Andrew. The thrust is on making work pay, making risk-taking pay, getting people to get up, go to work, and contribute to their families, their communities, and to our country.
All right, Richard Tice, for now, thank you very much indeed. Listening to that's Paul Johnson, the Provost at Queen's College, Oxford, and a former director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, often regarded as the gold standard measure on all of this stuff. Paul, your verdict.
Well, it's an interesting change, isn't it, from what we heard at the last election. The Reform Manifesto was pretty bizarre, honestly, in the sense of the huge scale of tax cuts that were being proposed with nothing on the spending side set out. What we heard today was actually much more like you'd expect from, frankly, a standard right-of-centre politician. There was nothing very surprising or unusual.
It was quite conservative.
It was quite conservative. I mean, what we heard was we want a smaller state, but as you often get, without any serious attempt to say how we get there. But what there wasn't this time were these tens, indeed hundreds of billions of supposed tax cuts that there were last time. So you got something that was more fiscally prudent, more fiscally conservative. There wasn't an enormous amount there on the economic side that you couldn't have imagined coming from the official opposition at the moment, in all honesty.
Very interesting. But this was, back at the election, this was Reform's, quotes, contract with Britain. Now, the Labour Party, and I suspect quite soon the Chancellor, is getting a lot of heat about not sticking to their election promises. But in effect, Reform have just torn up all of theirs.
Yeah, but look, I mean, opposition parties do this all of the time. I mean, the Labour Party in 2021 had no resemblance to the Labour Party manifesto in 2019. It's obviously very different as you go through time. And look, we understand the politics of this. Last year, Reform, no one expected them to win more than a handful of seats. They weren't in contention to win the election. No one took as much notice, frankly, as they should have done of the details of their manifesto. Next time round, if they maintain their position in the polls, they're going to get serious scrutiny, as is appropriate, and therefore they're beginning to move towards that. And
so do you think this is actually quite an important moment, in the sense that this is Nigel Farage looking in the shaving mirror and thinking, yikes, I might very well be Prime Minister, and I'm going to have to behave very differently from now on?
That's what it looks like to me, and I think that's that is a good thing. I mean, he's no more. I mean, none of the parties were particularly honest before the last election. Reform was particularly out there in terms of how implausible their promises were. They've now moved into the mainstream of implausibility. I mean, none of this is none of this is super clear or obvious, but I mean, it felt like a very mainstream kind of presentation today.
The mainstream of implausibility is a phrase I'm going to remember for a while. Paul Johnson, thank you very much indeed for that. And for her assessment, let's go straight to Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor, who was at the speech, listening to the answers and the questions and assessing them bit by bit. Natasha, did you come away thinking, yes, I understand philosophically who Reform are now these days?
Absolutely not, Andrew. I don't think any of us do. But I think what was clear to me from the speech today, this is Reform's journey. It could be anyway, from opposition into a possible government. And this today, I think, was an important step towards that, from fantasy Farage to fiscally responsible Farage. That's at least what he wants everybody out there to think of. However, I think from listening to Richard Tice just there, from listening to Nigel Farage this morning, it still feels to me like back of a fag packet Farage. It still feels to me like they've got a lot of numbers. They're not quite sure what their priorities are. I mean, listening to Richard Tice just there, all but admit that the triple lock is not safe under a Reform government. That is not something that Nigel Farage has indicated before. He has previously said we will look at this at some point before the next election. He was now very much saying, I don't know if we can afford it today. That feels like a big step forward to me.
I thought that was quite a moment. Do you think, in essence, this is Nigel Farage? I've seen this, people writing all over the place about this. Is this Nigel Farage trying to stop the main Labour attack on him up to now, which has been he's just going to be Liz Truss on steroids?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Liz Truss and the sort of comparisons to her has really hurt, I think, Reform in terms of they've obviously got what they think is a very strong immigration policy. They've been talking about law and order. They've been talking about crime. It's fair to say many people in the Labour Party feel that Reform's Achilles heel is the fact that their economic policies don't add up. And they think that the Liz Trussification of Reform is just another thing that they can hit them with. And you've heard today from government ministers saying that you can't trust a word that Reform says. And actually, when you do have a party that is setting out, let's be honest, incredibly ambitious plans, potentially £90 billion worth of tax cuts at the last election and then rowing back on them. That takes away a lot from Farage's credibility, that he is this man that's telling it how it is and he's not going to betray you like all those other politicians are. Well, actually, he's doing exactly the same as many other politicians do when they go from opposition into potential government. They realise things are a lot harder. The fiscal responsibility part is a lot harder than they thought.
Insurgent rebels no longer.
Yeah, exactly. And they can't pretend from now until the election to be the party that's not ready. We've just seen what happens when a party is not ready for government, with this Labour Party coming in with their plans not fully formed. So I think Nigel Farage wants to, at least if, all the polls are correct, we've seen, 100 polls in a row, 6 months of Reform leading in the polls. He knows that he has to, if he's going to win this next election, be trusted on the economy. He knows that's a weakness for his party and he has to address it within the the next 2 years. And hopefully we've all forgotten by the time of the election that he's rowed back on some of these promises.
Hopefully. It was certainly a really important day, I thought. Natasha, thank you very, very much. And I'd like your reaction to all of this too tonight. Do you see Reform now as a party that you would trust with your money? Text me on 84850 or email mar@lbc.co.uk. We'll be getting the latest from Cambridgeshire next after the horrific knife attack that took place on Saturday. You are listening to Tonight with Andrew Marr. Time now, 6:19.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
Why is there delay?
Straight to the point.
This government is unravelling everywhere you look.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
How can that make sense to anyone?
Listen on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC.
Calling all young creatives. It's time to get prepped for the media business. And where better than Global Academy? Here's Atina, a media business student in Year 12.
Being a young creative at Global Academy means that I get to turn my passion into a career. From studying creative enterprise, I've already learnt how to market my own business and gain knowledge about the business side of the industry.
Global Academy. Apply now and join us in Years 10 or 12. globalacademy.com.
Do it for your wife, who told you to pick up bread, but instead you picked up Fred, your grandson, again. And now your daughter is calling because he missed football. That's the 4th time this month. You can wave his future career goodbye. If you don't do it for you, do it for your wife and little Freddie.
New in, the latest custom-fit rechargeable hearing devices. Discreet, comfortable and smart enough to help you catch every moment. Book a free hearing test at bootshearingcare.com. T's and C's apply.
Hillary's best ever Black Friday sale is now on, and it doesn't get any better than this, with an extra 10% off absolutely everything. That's on top of up to 50% off hundreds of made-to-measure blinds, curtains and shutters. Plus, control your blinds from anywhere with a half-price smart hub when you buy any electric blind, with measuring and fitting always included. And word to the window wise. Order now for blinds and curtains fitted in time for Christmas. Book your free in-home appointment today at hillarys.co.uk. Conditions apply.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
6:21. The appalling knife attack on the train carrying passengers from Peterborough to London over the weekend was not a terrorist incident. And when we talk about broken Britain, we should remember all the bits that aren't broken. The bravery of the train staff and passengers, the great speed of police reaction, the fast NHS care offered to the survivors. The arrested man has also now been charged in connection with an attempted murder at an incident in East London. Let's get the latest from LBC's Luke Shannahan.
Andrew, 32-year-old Anthony Williams appeared in Peterborough Magistrates Court this afternoon, handcuffed and dressed all in grey, speaking only to confirm his name, date of birth and that he currently has no fixed address. He's charged with 11 counts of attempted murder, 1 count of actual bodily harm and 2 of possession of a bladed article in total, in connection with 2 reported knife attacks. So 2 of those charges, including 1 count of attempted murder, relate to an attack before 1 a.m. on Saturday, when someone was reportedly left with facial injuries after being hit with a knife at Pontoon Dock Station in East London. And then at about 7:30 that evening, police were called to reports a man with a large knife was attacking people on board the 6:25 p.m. train from Doncaster to King's Cross. 11 people needed hospital treatment after the attack. And this afternoon, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood gave a statement to the Commons praising the bravery of passengers and rail staff on board the train.
I would like to draw particular attention to one member of the onboard crew who ran towards danger, confronting the attacker for a sustained period of time and stopped his advance through the train. He put himself in harm's way, suffered grievous injuries as a result, and remains in hospital today in a critical but stable condition. On Saturday, he went to work to do his job. Today, he is a hero and forever will be.
British Transport Police say they're investigating other possible linked offences, and Cambridgeshire Police have confirmed they're looking into 3 such potentially linked reports. The first of those was the reported stabbing of a 14-year-old in Peterborough city centre after 7 p.m. on Friday. They were taken to Peterborough City Hospital with minor injuries and later discharged, thankfully. The second and third were reports of a man with a knife at a barber's in Fletton, that's just a little ways from Peterborough city centre, One of those was at 7:30 p.m. on Friday and then another after 9 a.m. on Saturday. The force wasn't able to identify or find the suspects and says it's referred itself to the police watchdog, which in turn has put out a statement saying it won't be investigating at this stage. In the meantime, Williams is due back in court on the 1st of December at Cambridge Crown.
Luke Shannahan there. Now then, there's a certain amount of harmony in the political stories today. Going back to that Farage speech, he argued that the bond markets were getting nervous and that in 2 budgets' time, they'd actually forced the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, into what he called a genuine austerity budget. But the Labour left wouldn't buy that, he said, which would cause an economic collapse, followed by an election in 2027. Now, you might think, oh, well, that's Nigel banging on again. But there are Labour people as well who are worried about the parliamentary party's effect on the bond markets. And LBC's political correspondent, Aggie Chambre, has a scoop about that very subject for us now. She's with me. Aggie.
That's right, Andrew. So Labour MPs and also special advisers are, as they're called, are being told that one of the greatest risks to the economy, to the bond markets at the moment is the instability of the Parliamentary Labour Party. They are basically being given these briefings by people like former Treasury Minister Kitty Usher. She was a Treasury Minister 2007. She now works for Barclays. And it sounds like she's sort of been asked to do this by Number 10, her along with some other
I was going to say, is this Number 10 basically putting the frighteners on Labour MPs, saying, come into line, vote for what you're told to, and stop trying to get rid of the Prime Minister?
I think honestly, I think that is exactly what has happened. So they have this sort of, it's called SPAD School, and all the special advisors come and they're given these presentations. And I'm told Kitty Usher turned up with these charts and basically said, look, this is really, really, really bad. She warned that it would not take too much to cause a Liz Truss-style market meltdown. She also said chaos would be...
Tell me that again. It wouldn't take... We're quite close to a Liz Truss-style moment.
Not necessarily quite close, but it wouldn't take too much to get there. And she also said chaos would be unleashed in the markets if the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, were to be replaced in Number 11. And when I asked someone what were the point of this meeting and the meetings happening with MPs too, they said to scare people into submission ahead of the budget. So I think exactly as you put your finger on, I think that is what is happening. But it sounds like they are genuinely really, really worried because the markets, she was saying, and other people are saying to these MPs too, are really worried. And they say the thing that is worrying them the most is political instability. And the thing that is really worrying them is the fact that the government can't get things through, like that crucial welfare vote. Obviously, they did get it through, but they had to make a number of U-turns before they did back in July.
This takes me back a little bit to the Andy Burnham moment at the time of the Labour conference. He was saying, let's not worry too much about the bond markets, and the bond markets went bonkers just as a result of that comment. So to this extent, it's the bond market saying we don't necessarily trust the ability of the Labour Party to get welfare cuts through, and we're particularly worried about any attempt to get rid of the Chancellor or the Prime Minister.
I think that is exactly what is happening. And they're basically saying, look, just trying to put the frighteners on people, saying we are in quite a precarious position when we're just only sort of 23 days out from the budget. And they are basically saying to these MPs, saying to special advisors to basically get in line because this could be very, very bad. And, you know, I'm sure you're hearing the same thing, but I'm being told by lots and lots of people the budget is going to be very, very difficult. And I think they're saying to these MPs ahead of that, don't make any sudden moves because this could be even worse than it has to be.
I hear the same. Aggie, jolly good story. Thank you very much indeed for that. But we have really gone above and beyond for you tonight because Aggie's is not the only exclusive look behind the curtains of the Parliamentary Labour Party. Our reporter, Joseph Draper, is also here in the studio with one of his own. Joseph.
Well, Andrew, 4 MPs were stripped of the whip back in July. Rachel Maskell, Neil Duncan-Jordan, Brian Leishman and Chris Hinchcliffe. They were among, you'll remember, 120 MPs who signed that rebel amendment, forcing the government to scale back many of the planned cuts to the welfare payments. They've now been told by the Chief Whip they won't be allowed back this year, meaning they'll be out of the fold for at least 6 months because they haven't been punished enough. Now, Poole MP Neil Duncan-Jordan has been describing his meeting with the Chief Whip.
There's an indication that we haven't served our time yet. We haven't served our punishment yet. Some individuals in the Labour Party, and I don't know who they are, think that it would be too soon for us to come back. It would give the wrong impression. And the whole process is completely opaque. It lacks transparency. To be left sort of hanging, not knowing, is really unacceptable, I think.
And there is a common link with Aggie's story as well. This is being seen as an attempt to stop potentially another rebellion just weeks before the Chancellor delivers her autumn budget. Now, Mr Jordan and his colleague, Brian Leishman, who he was also suspended, we've been speaking to him, they've both called on Number 10 not to be afraid of debate.
If we want our MPs to question, to analyse, to challenge, to speak out, then we have to allow them to occasionally say, I don't agree with this and I'm going to vote against it. Yeah. If we don't want politicians like that, then a robot could do my job, because a robot would be super loyal and it would do exactly what you wanted it to do every single time.
Now, we've been speaking to sources close to the Whip's office, Andrew. They say they've not put a time frame on a potential return to the party, but they want to resolve this issue as soon as possible. And a spokesperson for the Labour Party said the recent meetings with those MPs had been constructive and they would continue.
There'll be somebody in Number 10 thinking right now, is it possible to get a robot selected as a parliamentary candidate in the future? But for that, thank you very much indeed. Senior civil servants were put on the spot this afternoon over the appointment of Lord Peter Mandelson as our ambassador in Washington, despite his links to Jeffrey Epstein. We're going to hear from the politician who's pressurising them and the government for answers, Emily Thornberry. But the time now 6:30, and Tim Humphrey has your news.
The suspect in Saturday's high-speed train stabbings has been remanded in custody, charged with multiple counts of attempted murder. Police are investigating whether 32-year-old Anthony Williams is linked to 3 knife-related offences in his home city of Peterborough in the 24 hours before the attack. The deputy leader of Reform UK has told Andrew that should the party win power, it would need to find savings before it could bring in tax cuts. Earlier, Reform leader Nigel Farage said he believed an election could be held as soon as 2027. A head teachers' union has lost its attempt to bring a High Court challenge to Ofsted's plan to grade schools through report cards. The General Secretary of the NAHT says it will now consider industrial action. LBC weather: rain in northern and western England and in Wales tonight. Drier elsewhere, mild with a low of 10 degrees.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
After that horrific stabbing attack on the Peterborough train that left many people seriously injured, we're going to be asking what the political response has been and whether a knee-jerk move to increase stop and search is staring us in the face or completely the wrong answer.
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
So, what's on your to-do list today? Why don't you check if you're eligible for pension credit? It tops up your pension income and also opens up help with heating bills, council tax and more. Search pension credit on gov.uk or call 0800 99 1234. There's nothing to lose. Check today. Pension credit. Credit where credit's due. Eligibility criteria apply.
Train to Chichester. Flasks filled, snacks packed, all ready for Maisie's first stargazing adventure.
Come on, Maisie. Follow everyone up to the top of that hill.
Oh, look, that one's the plough.
Shooting star. Wow.
Made it. Last train back and feeling cosmic. And it seems we have an astronaut in the making. Download the Southern Railway app to book kids' tickets for £2 on off-peak journeys. Southern Railway, where every stop is a story.
Amazon has increased funding for employees to £3,000 a year, every year for career development. Like Juliet, she's now a trained technician. And to her, the sound of machinery in need of repair reminds her of how far she's come. In 2 years, she's landed her dream job, providing her with valuable skills. That's up to £3,000 every year for career development at Amazon. Eligibility conditions apply.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:33. Now, one thing I try to do of an afternoon is to eavesdrop on what Parliament's doing, and today there was what seemed like an absolute belter. The Foreign Affairs Select Committee grilling senior civil servants, including the Cabinet Secretary himself, Sir Chris Wormald, about the events leading up to the appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador in Washington. But it was, candidly, very disappointing, I have to say, an exercise in blocking, evading questions and simply refusing to answer them. For once, the MPs must have felt like frustrated journalists. I was joined a little earlier by the chair of that committee, Emily Thornberry, and I asked her what, if anything, she had learned.
There's many ways of saying not much. I learned that. It was very frustrating. I also learned that I have a very good committee, and we were all asking questions, but unfortunately we weren't getting a lot of answers, really. What I wanted to know, really, more than anything else, was, did anybody ask Peter Mandelson, how can you justify staying in Epstein's mansion or Epstein's townhouse in 2009 when he was serving an 18-month sentence for paedophilia? And I just still don't know if anybody asked that question or what the answer was, or whether the Prime Minister was told that specifically that that's what he had done. Because I know that he said that the later emails were game changers, but the later emails were very much of the same thing, which is he hasn't done anything wrong, it can be justified, I'm on his side. Well, that's kind of already, it's much of a muchness with staying in his house whilst he's serving a prison sentence for paedophilia. And I just don't know whether these civil servants were letting down the Prime Minister and not giving him the information, or whether the information was given to the Prime Minister and he didn't read it, or he didn't have time to read it, or he didn't apply his mind, or he didn't care. I just don't know. I just don't know. And that's very frustrating.
Well, those are clearly very, very important questions. How are you thinking of calling Peter Mandelson himself?
I don't know. We've got to kind of process all of this first and have a think about it. And we'll have to have a think collectively about what we should do next, if anything. I feel like the questions are there. The fact that we didn't get an answer, I think, speaks volumes, really.
All of those of us in the media who interview senior politicians are accustomed to the kind of block, divert, block, avoid the question, change the question style of answering. And your committee is now getting it from civil servants, not just today, but the former DPP as well last week. And I could see frustration in the committee there. Do you think public servants are forgetting their duty, not just of turning up, but of candour when it comes to Parliament?
Well, the DPP was at the Joint Committee for National Security, so I have the pleasure of being on two committees.
Yeah.
These sorts of answers from civil servants. I don't know. I mean, there was a question that we asked, which was, we asked of Ollie Robbins, who's the person who's in charge of the Foreign Office, was Peter Mandelson your choice for ambassador, or did you want someone else? And the non-answer to that was quite difficult to keep a straight face, really, because it was such a Mandarin answer and not answering the question, which one therefore assumes that Peter Mandelson wasn't the Foreign Office's choice. Otherwise, he would have said yes, wouldn't he?
He would, absolutely. Can I just move on to the other big story of the day, which is Nigel Farage has made a big economic speech at a time when they've been ahead in the polls for so long. A lot of people are beginning to look at reform and think, OK, what will they be like as the next government? And he's ditched a lot of his tax promises and said the scale of the fiscal problem is such that we have to be much more responsible. Do you think that, as it were, a more earnest, responsible-looking, fiscally small c Conservative Reform Party is even more of a threat to Labour than the previous version?
People who can add up in politics, and we certainly haven't had that from Reform until now. Their policies have been complete fantasy, and when they've been challenged, they've just given the most ridiculous answers. So much so that even Farage can see that he can't sustain this. He can't sustain this for another 3 years. He is going to need to answer some questions. And the difficulty is, if you're ahead in the polls and people start, and you want to be a party of government, then you've got to have a platform that actually makes some sense. So that's his challenge. Whether he's going to be up for it, we will wait and see.
He made what I thought was an interesting argument today that the bond markets are so hostile to this country, in a sense, they're hanging over the government, they're hanging over Rachel Reeves, and bit by bit, budget by budget, she will be forced to go to real austerity in a way which the Labour Party in Parliament, the PLP, will not accept. And that at that moment there will be a kind of meltdown which will cause an economic crisis and a general election as early as 2027. Just your response to that.
I don't think we're going to have an election before 2027. I think that we have a large majority and the government has a mandate. It's not easy. When the government was elected, we were elected in circumstances where the debt was the worst it had ever been, the taxes are the highest that they'd ever been, and public services are on their knees. So, no one said it was going to be easy. It isn't easy. The price of our debt is very high. We pay higher rates in our debts than, for example, much higher than the French or any of these other countries. So it is really difficult. I'm not pretending that it isn't, but I don't believe that the bond market is going to turn on a responsible Labour government who knows the size of the problem and is struggling with it in a way which is honest and straightforward.
Just sticking with the Parliamentary Labour Party, it's interesting that we've learned today that a former Labour minister, Kitty Usher, now a consultant working in the city and with big money, has been meeting Labour MPs to say, please, please, please stop manoeuvring and leaking and briefing against the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Prime Minister, because the bond markets are watching and there is real concern of ill discipline inside Parliament, causing real problems for the entire country. What's your feeling about that?
Certainly in the run-up to the budget, it is important that we remain disciplined and united. But that isn't to say that we shouldn't have opinions. And I've certainly written to to Rachel Reeves with some ideas that I've got for improving what may be in the budget. Whether she pays attention or not, I don't know. But it's better to do that privately than it is to do it publicly.
Oh, you're very, very welcome, Emily, to share them.
No, it's all right. Don't worry.
I guess the line below that is the fundamental question of the stability of the government, the stability of the Prime Minister, the stability of the Chancellor of the Exchequer. These are uncertain days, and you know perfectly well there are some of your colleagues briefing against each other, and a sort of sense that there may be regime change coming perhaps early next year at some point. Do you think that that is a real danger for this country in terms of the way the bond markets, the way the international financiers are observing us?
I think it's very interesting how I've actually had, well, I definitely won't mention their names, but I've had particular Liberal Democrats coming up and saying to me, there's not going to be a leadership challenge, is there? I hope there's not going to be a leadership challenge because, to be quite honest, it's not in the interest of the country. We do need some stability. We do. I was amazed. These are supposed to be opposition politicians. I mean, I agree with them because I think that we do need stability and we do need to have a period of calm and we need to be moving in the right direction. And on the whole, we are, but we don't explain it well enough. And then we make stupid mistakes and don't change our mind fast enough. You know what I think.
By stupid mistakes, we're talking about the winter fuel allowance. We're talking about the benefits vote.
Yeah. Absolutely. Changing the benefits allowance without really thinking through what it is you're trying to achieve, claiming that you're doing it in order to improve the system, but actually, on the face of it, at least, just changing it so that you get exactly the right amount of money that you need to save is not the way to encourage people that you are. That you say what you mean and mean what you say when it comes to benefit changes, because you have to have people's trust if you're going to make changes like that. They played it very badly.
They certainly did. Emily Thornberry, thank you very much indeed for talking to us today.
Pleasure.
Now, earlier on, I asked for your views about Nigel Farage and your finances. Reform are running at about 30% in the polls, and that's about the proportion of support they have in the messages coming in so far. Here's some examples. John sent us this on WhatsApp. If it ever comes to Farage trying to form a government, he doesn't have any consistent policies and keeps changing his mind on a sixpence. The reality of being in government is completely different to shouting down the opposition, which is all Farage currently has experience of doing. And Alice in Northwich says, needless to say, absolutely not. As we used to say, wouldn't trust Farage to run a bath. But then we've also got this from John, who's in Coulsdon. Andrew, the basics of reform's plans are sound, despite you and your commentators' clear bias. Well, if you want to carry on giving me your thoughts, it's 84850 on text or email mar@lbc.co.uk. Now then, here is what I think is a really shocking story. A researcher at Sheffield Hallam University, Professor Laura Murphy, has been working on the issue of forced labour and alleged human rights violations against the Uyghur people in China. But Chinese officials carried out a long campaign of intimidation against the university to stop her research being published. And so far as the university is concerned, they have been successful. Let's talk now to Luc de Pulford, founder and executive director of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China. Luc, the impression that we've got is that the university eventually caved in to the Chinese. Is that your impression?
Yes, absolutely it is. And unfortunately, the documentation that Professor Murphy had obtained via subject access requests and freedom of information requests seems to lay that out pretty clearly. Yes, they seem to have responded to the pressure from the Ministry of State Security or whatever intelligence agency it was in China. They wanted to know what she was working on, and they wanted those projects shut down, and they were shut down. So yes, it does seem rather that they've capitulated.
Pretty shocking. And I said there that the Chinese had been campaigning a campaign of intimidation they'd been waging against the university. What in practical terms, in real terms, did that mean?
Well, first of all, most openly, there was quite a lot of stuff on Chinese state media that was openly attacking her work, trying to discredit it. But there were also a number of lawfare attempts. So for the purposes of your listeners, Laura Murphy produced some really important research, very credible research, very methodologically sound research into forced labour in the solar supply chain. And she was working on a report that was about forced labour in the critical mineral supply chain. And the problem here is that there's so much forced Uyghur labour in China that it's bound up in these industries that we all rely upon. They were trying to attack that. Some of the companies involved in that, named in the report, had also tried to sue the department that Laura Murphy was working in. So there was a lot of lawfare in addition to public declarations by the Chinese government.
Is this the worst example that you have come across of an academic institution? Because, of course, almost all universities now have large numbers of Chinese students and are under some kind of pressure from the Chinese. But the worst example of a university actually giving in?
This is by far the worst example I've seen. It isn't the only example. There have been many other examples of attempted pressure from the Chinese government on various researchers in the UK, involving people like Professor Gilbert, involving Andreas Fulda, so many others around the UK. So that's not new. What seems to be new here is that they've caved in. And they've caved in according to the documentation, and I want to read this. They say, attempting to retain the business in China and publication of the research are now untenable bedfellows. That's a quote from documents from Sheffield Hallam. So it's pretty clear why they'd done it, at least according to those documents. And that's really serious, and yes, it's the worst case I've seen.
And have the Chinese or the university responded so far to you?
The university has responded. It has apologised to Professor Murphy, and it has said that there were many other factors at play in wanting to shut down her department. They now say that she can resume her work. So there seems to be a bit of backtracking there. The Chinese government have not yet made a statement, but they're likely to say what they usually say, which is that Professor Murphy produces a load of cod research which isn't worth the paper it's printed on, just trying to discredit China.
Luc de Pulford, as I said right at the beginning, a really disturbing story, this one. Thanks very much for talking to LBC. Coming up, we're going to get the latest from America as New Yorkers go to the polls in a mayoral election that could put the city on a collision course with President Trump. Time now, 6:47.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ali Mirage. Ali Mirage at 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or our new LBC app.
At TfL, we're helping make roads safer. We're continuing to roll out lower speed limits because 20 miles per hour roads have already seen 24% fewer collisions causing death or serious injury. We're also improving junctions to help keep you safe and improving visibility for our bus drivers with new wing mirror cameras. Search TfL Improvement Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Comparison of collisions data before and after implementation of 20 miles per hour speed limit.
Chase is the digital bank that could boost your savings.
Ooh, tell me more.
When you join Chase, you could earn 4.5% AER variable. That includes a 2% AER fixed boost for 12 months on top of our standard saver rate.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yep, our savings boost could help you reach your goals, like that once-in-a-lifetime adventure. Get our best easy access saver offer today. Search Chase Boosted Saver. Offer may be withdrawn at any time. 18 plus UK residents. Available to new current account customers for your first 31 days. Eligibility applies. 4.41% gross. Terms apply.
It's that time of year again, which can only mean one thing. Save a third off roasting joints at Waitrose. Choose from tender beef silverside, succulent whole brined and seasoned chicken, or juicy beach smoked gammon. So, fire up your ovens and give winter a warm welcome with a third off roasting joints. Waitrose, the home of food lovers. Selected lines and stores subject to availability. Prices may vary in Channel Islands, Little Waitrose and Partners and Concessions. Offer ends 11th of November.
Leading Britain's Conversation, LBC, tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:49. New Yorkers go to the polls tomorrow to decide who will be the most recognisable and arguably most important mayor in the United States. And this has been one hell of a race, with the left-wing candidate Zohran Mamdani looking set to win. Stories emerged today that even Jeremy Corbyn's getting involved. Let's hear now from Ali Milani, the chair of the Labour Muslim Network, who famously ran against Boris Johnson in Uxbridge and who joins us from New York on the campaign trail. A little more glamorous, perhaps, than last time I spoke to you in Uxbridge, but very, very welcome, Ali. How important do you think this race is, not just for New York, but for, as it were, the reputation of the West of the left around the West?
Well, first, Andrew, thank you so much for having me. I am joining you from Manhattan, but I will just say Uxbridge is still the most glamorous place I've ever spoken to you in.
I thought you might say that.
This race is enormously important, not just for the future of New Yorkers here, but I think it plays an important symbolic role for the world. The way I view it, the reason I'm in New York is because I believe this race is a question of what is and isn't possible in politics. Zohran Mamdani started on 1% of the polls. He was facing the giant of Andrew Cuomo and the Democratic establishment. And through an amazing communication strategy, campaign, organizing at the grassroots, he's now favored to win the race tomorrow. And I think it's a question of what can be accomplished by grassroots organizing, what can be accomplished by a dynamic, exciting left-wing voice in a race. And he's now gone from 1% all the way up to 50. So I think tomorrow, when we hopefully have the announcement that the new mayor of New York City is Zohran Mamdani, we also have an announcement to every metropolitan city around the world that anything is possible.
What are the policies that have really caught people's imagination in New York?
Well, ironically enough, it's very similar to London. What we're hearing here in the city is affordability. The cost of living crisis is squeezing people. The cost of their rent, the cost of travel, the cost of food. It's the same pain and stories that we hear in London. It's the same it's a story that's entwined. And what Zohran has done fantastically is speak to those issues. Where Andrew Cuomo has relied on his name recognition and endorsements from sort of old, tired dinosaurs in the political establishment, Zohran has said, yes, we will freeze your rent. We will introduce fast and free buses. We will introduce universal childcare into the city. And those issues that are the issues that everyday New Yorkers face and the anxieties that they have is what's connected most with people.
So, speaking as an old, tired dinosaur myself, is this, do you think, New York's Jeremy Corbyn moment? We know he's there phone banking and helping.
Well, Andrew, you're very young and dynamic, man. Don't put yourself short. Look, it's an exciting moment. And I think one of the things that is confounding people in the establishment is how Zohran was able to be successful. Well, the reality is, I think there is a generation of people, probably around my age, but also older, who are looking for a different style of politics. The sort of Andrew Cuomo's, a lot of them in our parliament, old style of politics doesn't connect with them anymore, both in the issues that they talk about and the style of the content that they put out. Zohran became very popular by his social media content, for example. And so I think there is a real urgency and a real willingness from the population, young and old, poor and rich, really, of all ethnic and gender diversities, who are looking for something different. Zohran has connected with it, and hopefully once he wins tomorrow, it's a message to the rest of us in London, in Paris, and the world at large, that if we do politics differently, we can be successful.
So obviously he's going to be on a collision course with President Trump if he wins, and there'll be all sorts of threats about funding. Your thoughts on that, and also whether the Democratic Party is watching this from across America and thinking maybe this is the future for us?
Yes, I mean, look, we've had the threats from Trump. I was stood side by side with Zohran today as he addressed those issues. And it's not dissimilar to the noise that I've heard in London when we've asked for a wealth tax. And what we hear is, well, the rich and powerful are going to leave our city. The reality is, politics can't work like that anymore. You can't hold people to hostage and say, if you vote for Zohran Mamdani, then we're going to cut your city of funds. Or if you introduce a wealth tax, the billionaires will just get up and leave and take all the wealth out of the city. You cannot hold people hostage, and people are seeing through it. They're tired of threats. They're tired of the politics of division, of fear, and they want something to believe in. They want something hopeful. And that's what Zohran has delivered to them, and that's what I think that's what we can do in London and across the world. And I'll say this, in regards to who's watching and everyone's watching, one of the reasons I'm here is because if this is possible in New York, if Zohran Mamdani's story is possible in New York, it's possible anywhere.
Really interesting. It's a long and very, very important day tomorrow, Ali. Thank you so much for talking to LBC tonight. Now, they're enormous, weighing up to 35 kilograms. They've been compared to dustbin lids and have 8 frilly arms. And they're all around us. I'm not talking about something that escaped from Halloween festivities, however, but about giant jellyfish which are appearing in the seas all around Britain. I'm joined now by somebody who's been studying this for some time, Lizzie Daly, who's been studying this, I think, for a long time. Lizzie, is this purely, as it were, a warming seas, global warming kind of story?
I think comparing them to dustbin lids is a bit mean, to be fair. They're actually quite sophisticated animals. So this is something normal that happens every year. So from about May to now, September, October, we get these seasonal visitors. These warmer waters bring them in. And, this isn't a fluke. This isn't just by chance. They're brought in by currents. They're here to feed on plankton, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. They're not just big old blobs that wander in our seas and sting us when on the beach. They have these movements up and down water columns, and they are magnificent. They are really big, and the UK's largest jellyfish.
There I read about as heavy as a Labrador dog, which having a Labrador dog of my own means quite a lot. But they're not terribly dangerous, are they? They don't sting very badly, these particular ones.
No, you're absolutely right in saying they're frilly arms, which I think a lot of people associate with those kind of stinging cells. They have those. They're called nematocysts, and they're covered, these big arms that they've got. But yeah, to humans, it's super mild. You get other species with those long, thin tentacles. They're the ones that you really want to look out for. So other species you might get across the UK, lion's mane jelly, but they're far less common.
Lizzie, you're a wildlife biologist by trade, so tell us a little bit about the other things in the seas that are being drawn by these warmer currents.
Yeah, I've had a fascinating year, actually. A few months ago, I found myself in an octopus boom. So we've seen this huge rise in octopus numbers because of these warming waters. And remember, from the Gulf Stream, which is right across the Atlantic, we get brought all these seasonal visitors, turtles, leatherbacks. I've seen Kemp Ridley turtles, a critically endangered species, on our shores, on the coast of Wales and Cornwall. So our seas are vibrant. They're full of life. We also have Risso's dolphins and humpback whales and orca on our shores, and a lot of us don't realise that. But it's significant because we are starting to see our seas changing, and we're starting to see more of these warmer loving species arrive on our coastlines.
I go swimming off the northwest coast of Scotland, and one day I really, really want to bump into a leatherback turtle. I think that's my dream. If you can fix it, I'd be very, very grateful.
Let me know when you do. Even I'd love to do that. That sounds great.
But orca, I didn't realise there were orca around us as well.
Absolutely. There's a pod in Scotland next time you swim in called the West Coast Community Pod. 2 males left in the pod, and they kind of patrol around the West Coast, even down to places like Cornwall and off the coast of Wales. It's magnificent.
Look forward to it enormously. Lizzie Daly, wildlife biologist and broadcaster, thank you so much for talking to LBC tonight. Now we have got an absolute barnstormer of a show for you tomorrow. The former Labour leader, Neil Kinnock, the London Labour Mayor, Sadiq Khan, a former General Secretary of NATO, and one more very special guest we can't yet tell you about. But do please tune in tomorrow at 6 to find out all. If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion. You can put your news categories in the order you'd like them. You can pause, you can rewind live radio, and you can listen to a range of podcasts. Download the all-new official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC is Ben Kentish. But right now, it's time for Ali Mirage.
Thanks, Andrew. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has rowed back on his party's previous promise